be here fully present. But if taking notes helps you be fully present, fantastic. Fully up to you. It's difficult to even fathom the different winding roads that landed each of us here. So many different lives lived. And I think we all just got a feel for that a little bit with what ended up on the altar. So many different experiences, and yet somehow we're all here. And in a sense, we're here for different reasons. And in another way of thinking, we're here really for the same core reasons. Something that I said earlier while we were hiking, you don't end up here because everything is great all the time. You don't end up on a meditation retreat because everything is just so fantastic and you have no problems and everything's just going swell. So, all of us have some sense that it's important to be here. And there's two sides of that. One is, ideally, we're here so we can let go of some of our unwholesome ways of being, or some of the things that we're holding on to that just aren't helping, ways that we're judgmental towards ourselves or others, or rigid or avoidant of things going on in our lives. In some way, all of us have all of these patterns. And this weekend is a chance to let go of some of those. So we're all here for that reason, even if we've framed it slightly differently. And by the same measure, we're also all here to pick up some more wholesome habits, or to strengthen or lean into some things that are supportive, some non-judgmental ways of being, perhaps some wisdom, some kindness, some softness, some connection to something that is greater than our small, petty minds that we live with all the time. So these are all good reasons to be here. And however we might formulate our reasons, and I invite everybody to spend a little bit of time as we start the retreat to really think about, why am I here? But I imagine it relates in some way, shape, or form to leaving behind what's not wholesome and picking up what is wholesome, what is going to help. To the point of the difficulty that we have all faced that have led us here, some of the same difficulties, some different difficulties. And why we're here, why is it that meditation, why is it that these practices that we're doing this weekend are helpful or supportive for our ailments, the dis-ease of our minds? There's a beautiful, beautiful quote by Lala, and I'll read it here so I don't botch it. She wrote, "I went everywhere with longing in my eyes, until here in my own house I felt truth filling up my sight." That is what we're here for this weekend. There is already truth within our sight. It's blocked, though. It's blocked for all of us, myself included. This is such a useful time to drop in and settle and find that the things that we're really wanting, not the things that we want at face value, those things are good and important too, but the things that we really want, peace, security, ease, connection, those are right here. They're always accessible to us, even when they don't feel like it. This is what we're here to let fill our sight. And this house, here in my own house, I felt truth filling up my own sight, is none other than our own experience. It's our body. So these creaky old houses, some creakier than others. I'm only 30, but my body is pretty creaky, as anybody who has been around me for the last year or two can tell you. So we have these creaky bodies, but we have even creakier minds. Constantly not at rest with the way that things are, constantly fighting circumstances which are already difficult, making them even more difficult. And so throughout this week, we will be exploring all of the different places of these lovely houses of our experience, each of us. And there are truly some lovely places that we will find. I hope and imagine that each of us will have some delightful, sweet experiences. That will happen. And without a doubt, one of my teachers used to refer to this as, sometimes it's like walking through a haunted house, and you're here and you're waiting for the sit to end so that you don't have to sit in this haunted house anymore. So tired of your past difficulties and your current difficulties with your circumstance, your discomforts, the ways that you wish things were otherwise. So the next few days we'll be floating in and out of these different parts of these houses. We'll be exploring. And we'll be learning how to be with them with a brighter, kinder mind. That is our practice, and Peter and I will guide each day sequentially a little bit more, giving you a little bit more of a feel. But the core of it is what we're doing, relaxing, finding ways to be kind to ourselves in our moment-to-moment experience. And we will give a little bit more encouragement than that. I'll say a little bit more about our practice in a minute. But why is this necessary? First, beyond just the base level explanation that it's difficult to be a human being and it's difficult to have a human mind. One way that I really have benefited from considering this in my own life and have enjoyed explaining it to others and seem supportive, there's a concept in Buddhist psychology called the Aggregates. In the original language of Buddhism, they are the Skandhas or the Khandhas. And aggregates means that they come together to form something. So what are they coming together to form? They're coming together to form our sense of self. They're coming together to form these houses, which are sometimes haunted houses and sometimes delightful pleasure houses, and everything in between. So there's 5 of them. And we'll be getting quite intimate with them. We're always intimate with them. They're making up our experience all the time. But this week we'll be deconstructing them a little bit and learning to be more flexible and perhaps even play with these aggregates, be more relaxed with them, not so constrained to always do the next thing that the mind wants us to do. You don't have to remember these. I'll share a little bit about them now. And to the extent that it's interesting or something clicks for you, great. And maybe it doesn't, and that's fine too. The first aggregate is form. It's just our physical form and our most direct experience of any given moment. And so, for the most part, we'll be working in this sense with our bodies. What is physically happening in my body? What are the sensations that I'm feeling right now? For example, right now, I feel a little bit of discomfort on the inside of my knee. I can feel just a little bit of a pang. But there's a particular sensation. I've already skipped ahead to discomfort, so you know it's unpleasant. Even before that, I just feel something a little bit sharp and pulsing right here. That is part of my current experience of form. What we know from modern neuroscience, one of the most kind of respected and prevalent theories of the mind in neuroscience is predictive processing theory. The SparkNotes version of this, because I'm not going to give a dissertation about predictive processing, is that we're constantly making predictions about what our reality is based on information that we're getting from our bodies. And our bodies then get information back from our mind, and that confusion of signals goes back and forth. And somehow, miraculously, we make out some sense of reality out of it, and most of us share most of our sense of reality. That is kind of miraculous. Sometimes these things go a little bit haywire. Actually, pretty often. We get a little small stimulus and it becomes the biggest stressor in the world. So often. Just the other day, this was happening to me. Yesterday, or when was it that I had my work call? Yesterday, was it? And it was like not that important, but of course, it's the most important thing in the world. It's so stressful immediately. I know at least one other person who was stressing about work-related, so I completely relate. So sometimes we get these signals from our bodies, and the mind interprets them in such a way that they become much more threatening and concerning. And this also has a lot to do with our past experiences. As we start to pay more attention to our bodies, and this is actually also validated in research, we can correct some of those assumptions that might not be true. It might not actually be such a big danger or concern. And if I can pay attention to some of the signals that I'm getting that tell me that, oh, this is a really concerning thing that was just said to me in this work call, or this feeling in my knee, this, oh my gosh, this is terrible. Actually, it's not so bad. If I pay attention to it, my mind can start to reset that. That was a little bit of a tangent, but that's form. The second aggregate is sometimes called feeling, better called feeling tone. Certainly that's how we'll focus on it. The Pali for this word is Vedana, which is actually means a way of knowing. And this is our way of knowing our reality. It's our way of knowing whether things are good or bad. This is the first place that the foundations of judgment arise. We feel some things as pleasant, some things as unpleasant, other things as neither pleasant nor unpleasant. And the pleasant things we want more of, and the unpleasant things we want less of. And the things that are neither pleasant nor not pleasant, we tend to ignore in most circumstances. And in so doing, we end up in a lot of habit loops, which we'll talk about in a moment, which don't actually serve us very much. We try to go more and more for something that might feel good in the short term and actually not be that supportive. Or we go further and further away of something that feels scary or bad, even though it's really important to do. And we don't pay attention to things that are actually important to ourselves or perhaps to our loved ones because they don't feel like much to us. The second aggregate. The third aggregate is best called labeling Sometimes it's called perception. Sanya. And labeling is good because this is the place where we start to recognize things. We start to say, this is floor, and this is bell, and this is page. It doesn't require us to actually verbalize that, but often we can experience that as an internal verbalizing. Some people are more visual and they might not actually experience something as verbal. They might have some kind of visual experience of labeling or of perception. It's our way of connecting our reality to what's right in front of us. So we actually understand, okay, I know this. I know what this thing is. This is familiar to me. This also fits nicely with the predictive processing theory that I mentioned a second ago. This is our way of understanding our reality. Again, not inherently bad, but often we jump to conclusions that we don't need to jump to. We see things as things that we've seen before, when in reality, we've never seen any of this before. Even Peter, who I've seen so many times before, I've never actually seen this very person in this moment before. But I will make a false assumption that I can expect to know what his reactions and experiences are, because I've seen him in different circumstances many times before, and because he looks like Peter. There's a value to this. This is very important, don't get me wrong. It's good that we can recognize each other's faces and interact with each other. And also, it's good for us to loosen our sense of knowing exactly what or how things are going to be based on our previous perceptions. And then we have the most interesting one to me, which is maybe best translated as habitual. You can think of them as habits or habitual behaviors. It's really our conditioning from a kind of Western psychological standpoint. So these are called Sankaras in Pali. And these are the things that are ingrained in us, and we all have them from so many different circumstances in our lives, which lead us to behave or react in certain ways to the stimuli that come in. And it's what happens automatically. And it's even not just the external behaviors, but it's also the internal behaviors, the thoughts that we have. Sometimes this word is translated as volition, which is appropriate because it's what actually drives us in a certain direction. I'm feeling this thing that feels familiar because I've perceived it in the previous step. And because I've perceived it in such a way, and because I feel that it's good or bad in such a way, I'm going to behave in this way that I'm familiar with. This is my conditioning. An example. My blood sugar is high. My blood sugar right now is not high, I think. Not too bad. But my blood sugar is high, and it's been high for a while, and I've given a lot of insulin, and it's not coming down, and I moved around, and it's not coming down, and I'm getting more and more frustrated, and it's becoming more and more unpleasant, and I'm losing less of a sense of control or clarity about the situation. And what happens next is something that most of us are probably familiar with. It's called the rage bolus. And so I'll give myself a lot of insulin all at once because that is my habitual reaction to just make it go away. And that is one example of a habitual behavior or tendency. Another example, this is a good one that I'm working on. Sometimes in close relationships, if I get really stressed or upset about something, rather than becoming very angry and yelling about it or being cruel or something, I'll just shut down and my emotions will just disappear. It's quite convenient in a sense, not having some emotions for a while, but ultimately not good for the relationship. Ultimately not good for me to be able to take care of myself. So that shutting down, that is a habitual tendency. The emotions get too big. For some people, it's the opposite. Some people, the emotions get big and then they get even bigger and explode and they have an angry outburst. These are all kinds of habitual tendencies. There's wholesome habitual tendencies too, but I'm focusing on the more unwholesome ones because perhaps those are ones that we can work with a little bit this week. Each of these lead really nicely into the next in a little circle. You feel something or you see something, it feels good or bad, you perceive it as something familiar and you react to it accordingly. And we get stuck that way, acting the same ways over and over that don't quite work. And so that's what we're here to do, not act in some of those ways. Leave some of those ways behind. And how we do that is through this very practice that we've been talking about so far. And why is this practice helpful for this cycle? In a sense, we're actually overriding our habitual tendencies. I didn't mention the fifth aggregate is where everything comes together. It's called consciousness, Vijnana. So this is our sense of a situation that we're actually conscious of after the fact. It's our cohesive sense of reality. In doing this practice, which will be very much oriented towards relaxing the body, being gentle with ourselves, sharing kindness with each other silently, but hopefully palpably, we start to develop other signals in our body and mind. We can feel things that are pleasant, or things that are unpleasant we might have a different relationship with through compassion or forgiveness. So we feel something, and immediately the feeling tone of it changes. The second aggregate we're working on by developing softness and kindness. Even the first aggregate we're working on by not staying so tense. The tension continues this cycle down a path that is not as helpful. So first we relax, that immediately changes things. And we develop some of these wholesome states of mind, which are actually quite pleasant by and large. This is really important. Not every meditation practice is oriented this way, and that doesn't mean other practices are wrong. There's many ways to practice meditation. But a real strength of the form of meditation that we'll be practicing is that it hopefully feels somewhat good. And you should be feeling good in your body for the most part. You know, we're not asking you all to do really long sits and stay so still and, you know, sit all knotted up in full lotus or anything. We should be in comfortable seats, practicing in a pleasant way with ourselves. And in this way, developing some more positive feeling. And immediately that positive feeling, we start to understand and label our experiences differently. Immediately. We've kind of overridden part of this process. So the labeling, our perception of things is different. This is also actually validated in some really interesting research that was done with Tibetan Buddhist monks who had spent tens of thousands of hours practicing. And off of the top of my memory, we'll have to go back and do a fact check on this. But their reaction to stimuli that caused fear and disgust for normal people on a screen was compassion. This was the state that they were already in. They were practicing it all the time. And their brain actually looked different in these circumstances. It still reacted. It wasn't just how it already looked. They still reacted to images, but they reacted quite differently. There was less activation in the amygdala, these fear centers of the brain, and more in other parts. What I'm remembering is probably the anterior cingulate cortex. And more of a relationship between these different parts of the brain, some which are related to fear, others related to other emotions, some of which might be more wholesome. So we don't get so hijacked by our fear all the time. Actually, the original time, who knows whether this is historically true or not, but it is purported that the original time that the Siddhartha Gautama, who many people refer to as the Buddha, the original time that he taught his students loving kindness was when they were all terrified. They went on a little trip out to the forest and they met some scary creatures, and they came back and they were like, hey, we are not going to go back there and meditate. And he said, actually you are, but you're going to meditate with loving kindness. And this was the first time that they were introduced to this practice. So it is a way for us to override our sense of fear and not having enough and not being at ease. And then the last step of this, as these habit patterns, as these volition to behave in these familiar ways, some wholesome, some unwholesome, as this emerges, we also meet it differently. We don't have to just give in every time. We're not so caught up in the cycle if we are relaxed in our body, if we are able to be loving and at peace with the very fact that we're reacting, which is often the first place that we have to come at. Often we get to the point of reacting internally or externally, and that is the first place that we can practice forgiveness or self-compassion or loving kindness for ourselves, because we might be disappointed or frustrated with ourselves. And as we practice those things, things can actually settle, and we don't have to keep going down that same route. There can be some deconditioning, some what you would call extinction of our conditioning over time. So the core of the practice is just that, relaxing, touching into what kindness is in this moment. And Peter and I will give a lot of guidance, especially early on, as far as how to get in touch with that. Letting that eventually flood and pervade your experience of your body. Letting your body be at ease and safe and loved. And even going beyond that to share that with this room of beautiful people. And even beyond this room of people. Out really endlessly. Sounds great. It's not going to be that simple though. Along the way, as mentioned, you will have pleasant and unpleasant experiences, and you will explore a lot of different places of this house that is your experience. And you're going to have a number of internal teachers, let's say, during that time. And these internal teachers are the hindrances. They're what actually keeps you, quote unquote, from your meditation practice. Actually, they're just teaching you about your meditation practice. Peter and I are not here to teach. Only your own experience can teach. Only your own experience can teach. This is up to each person in this room to learn about yourself, to learn about your mind, to learn how to settle into what is here, to be with what is in a kinder way. We can't teach that, but we can try to help create the optimal conditions for you to learn that from yourself. What you're learning from internally are these hindrances. I'll go out of order with these hindrances because I can tell everybody's tired of me talking. The first hindrance is craving, but the second hindrance is aversion. And so you might feel aversion towards your physical experience. You might feel aversion towards certain thoughts that you're having. But ultimately, as you're sitting, you will just have a sense of aversion. Something is not right, and I don't like it, and I want to push it away. I want to push what I'm experiencing away. This is a kind of teacher. It's teaching you about something. Aversion is teaching you that you're too tight in your mind. What aversion is wanting to say is that you shouldn't keep going for a goal that's out here. You're not going somewhere with your meditation practice. You're right here already. And when you're feeling this aversion, it means you're leaning forward so much with your mind and not actually able to be present. And so when you sense this, finding out how to lean back, step back in your experience. Alternatively, you could try to figure out how to get me to stop talking, but it hasn't worked well in the past. Okay, the first hindrance is craving. Craving is what it sounds like. You want something. Something feels good. Often the way this will manifest in moment-to-moment meditation practice is you'll have a fantasy of something that you like. It could be some delicious ice cream, or it could be that you are so excited to see your loved ones or dogs, or something else. Of course, it could also be a sexual fantasy. I want to just normalize that. Very common during meditation practice. You can expect that to happen. Maybe not every time, not for everyone. There's all kinds of cravings that will emerge. Maybe you're craving an imagination of something in the future, some reward that you hope to get from your hard work. These are all telling you that you're not enjoying your practice enough. Of course, it sounds so easy for me to sit up here and say that. It takes a long time to enjoy your practice. I remember, my mom can tell you, I was a pretty uncoordinated kid, and all my friends were good athletes. And I was like, I want to learn how to play basketball with my friends. And it wasn't very fun at first. And I was sucked. I was not good at basketball. So I just spent a lot of time trying to do it. And eventually got good enough that it was fun to play with my friends. The same way meditation practice takes time to have some fun with. Maybe it won't always feel fun, but it can feel pleasant, it can feel easeful, it can feel relaxing. So craving is telling us that we're needing to go somewhere else for pleasure, for enjoyment. And actually, we can find it here in our seats. That is part of our work. The next one is sloth and torpor. And you can think of this manifesting as like a dull mind or even a sleepy mind. Often in our culture, if we're sleepy, it's because we're sleep deprived. So that's quite likely. But quite often also, especially on a meditation retreat, you might feel a kind of dullness of mind or even sleepiness. You might be nodding off a little bit. And the cause is actually that you've exhausted your mind. You've exhausted your mind through this constant pushing forward, this leaning forward of wanting to get some goal that's not currently here. And if you do that enough, your mind will eventually collapse and become dull, and you'll become sleepy. So you'll probably have some of that. What is that telling you? Well, just to settle and relax into your experience. You don't need to fight the fatigue. You can gently try to steer yourself towards a brighter mind. And we'll give instruction and guidance on how to do that. But this is just telling you something about your experience. And then there's restlessness, which can be caused either by long talks or, again, by not enjoying practice too much or enough. So craving often collapses into restlessness over time. We continue to not enjoy what's happening right here, and eventually we get restless and antsy and we want to go do something else. Aversion can also collapse into restlessness. The final hindrance is doubt. This is maybe the most important one to speak about. While we're sitting here, over time, you will likely have repeated thoughts of, what the hell am I doing? Am I doing a good job of this? I'm probably not very good at this. I might not be doing this right. Is anything happening for me? Etc., etc., etc. These are actually just normal thoughts. And they're just part of this cycle that we talked about before. You feel something unpleasant, you jump to the conclusion that you don't know what's going on. It's just a habitual pattern of doubting something that doesn't seem to be going well as a self-protective mechanism. Actually, by this point, hundreds of thousands, millions, tens of millions, perhaps more people have done the exact types of practices that we're doing this weekend and benefited a lot. So you can be assured that you're moving in a good direction. At its root, what doubt is a challenge or difficulty or inability to differentiate what is wholesome and what's not wholesome, whether things are on the right track or they're not on the right track. And when you experience this, just seeing it for what it is and not needing to immediately change it is the best medicine. Okay, I'm having difficulty distinguishing whether this is going well or not, and indeed whether this is even worth my time or not. What if I just relax and settle into that? What happens if I bring some loving kindness to that experience? How does that change what I'm experiencing? So we've gone through multiple lists at this point. We've gotten 2 lists of 5. The 5 Skandhas, the 5 Hindrances. And maybe some of it sticks and some of it doesn't. We'll come back to certain elements of this over the weekend. The core of this is each moment is a teaching experience, and you are your own teacher. That is the core takeaway of what the deal is with these 5 hindrances. And there's a quote that I love from the Zen tradition that I'd love to end on as an encouragement for these next few days, which will undoubtedly be internally messy and at times uncomfortable, and ultimately quite rewarding. I encourage everyone with the following words. No matter who tries to leave their mark, the hills and the dales are not impressed. This is a farmer in ancient China who wrote this about his meditation practice. And all he was saying was, all these experiences, they come, they go, it's pleasant, it's unpleasant, I love it, I hate it, and at the end of the day, I'm still here sitting. I'm just showing up over and over. Just like a hill that's unchanging, just like a mountain, just sitting here, whatever's coming up. So I just encourage everybody, however this feels like it's going at any given moment, just hang in there, relax, settle into your experience, and be kind to yourself.